Oh, Dr. Leaf, thank you so much for having me. It's always so wonderful to hear a fellow South African beautiful accent. And as we're doing this interview, I am actually so fortunate to be sitting in South Africa, just visiting my parents, and you know how beautiful just the Cape Winelands, old Cape area is. And it's wildflower season right now. So you have all these beautiful, just little wildflowers popping up all alongside the road, and just such a beautiful time of the year. So happy to be here and so happy to be speaking with you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so happy to be speaking with you, and I'm so jealous. That is such a beautiful time of the year. It's, once you know South Africa, those of you that haven't been yet, make a trip. Because it is Cape Town,
Very
and the
true.
Cape and the Winelands is one of the most beautiful places in the world. And I've been everywhere like you. And it really truly is a beautiful, beautiful part of the world. So I'm so pleased that you're talking from South Africa, which is fantastic. But Demi, you were Miss South Africa in 2017 and Miss Universe in 2017, and you moved to the States, and you have an incredible story. So I'd love you to give a little bit of background to my listeners and viewers. Most people know you, but if they don't, this is just a great chance for you to share and tell us a little bit about you and your life, and then we'll dive into some of the amazing things that you're doing.
Don't want to bore them with a whole long background story, but if I could just put my life story in a few sentences. Like you said, I grew up in South Africa, born and bred. I won Miss South Africa, which was one of the greatest honors of my life, to be able to be a representative for our home country, and just carry the South African flag high on a big international stage. And I was so fortunate to be able to go and compete as Miss South Africa at the Miss Universe competition. And that really is a once in a lifetime opportunity. You can literally never ever compete at Miss Universe again. It's not even like the Olympics where in 4 years you can give it another shot. This is really a one and done, and the reason for that is you can really never go back and win Miss South Africa twice or win your national title twice. I was fortunate enough to win that competition. That was another great honor of my life, and I moved to New York City. That was part of my contract as Miss Universe. You live in New York City for a year. And that year was so crazy. I had so many international trips that I just didn't even really get to experience America or, for argument's sake, even New York. And I decided soon after I moved there that, I'm traveling so much that I would love to stay at least another year and just, give the modeling world a go and see what I can make out of my career after Miss Universe. And in between all of that craziness, I met my boyfriend back then, who then became my fiance and is now my husband, Tim Tebow. And long story short, America is now a pretty much permanent home for me, but I still spend a lot of time back in South Africa. Like I said, I'm actually here right now. My family, everyone is still back here. So whenever I get the opportunity to come back to South Africa, I grab that opportunity with both hands and I make my way.
I understand that.
Even when traveling is crazy at the moment. I don't know, I'm sure so many of you guys listening will relate, but I mean, this trip is canceled flight on canceled flight, but we made it. Couple days of traveling, but we made it. And so living in Jacksonville, Florida at the moment, we have 3 beautiful dogs, Chunk, Paris, and Kobe. I have been so fortunate to be able to use the platform that I've been given as Miss Universe and Miss South Africa to really use it as a stepping stone. And I never wanted to see that opportunity as my end destination, my end goal. For me, that was always a stepping stone to where I wanted to be one day. And, in that moment of being Miss Universe, I knew that I did not necessarily, that wasn't my end goal, that wasn't my end destination, but it's so hard between all that craziness to really fully know what your end goal is. And I think in that moment, I probably put a lot of pressure on myself to fit a mold that the world probably wanted a former Miss Universe to fit into, whether that be becoming an actress or becoming a, supermodel. And that mold just didn't quite fit for me, just didn't quite feel right. I've always been very driven. As a young child, I remember just being a little entrepreneur, selling pies at my mom's office, or I was in boarding school my whole high school career in South Africa. And I remember that I saw a big need and tried to fill it, and that was that everyone always forgot to bring their own toilet paper. We were asked to bring our own toilet paper, and listen, that's a pretty big dilemma in a big boarding school with 120 girls. So
that's so funny.
I've seen opportunities, and that's kind of where I think my background as an entrepreneur started. My love for business started. All my parents are their own business owners, entrepreneurs, and actually my stepmom is a neuropsychologist. So I have learned so much from her throughout my whole life. She's taught me the most incredible lessons. So I'm sure you guys will actually have a lot in common.
I'm sure we'll have to connect one day, all our families in South Africa, for sure.
We will definitely get that done.
Oh, that's an incredible background. And you also have some very interesting stories about, I mean, please just quickly go to Sagefield where you grew up. I know that part. I mean, when I was just, describing the little village of 15, little town of 15,000, how you went to George for boarding school. It's always so nice hearing the places that you've visited and been to, and such a gorgeous part of the world. And so interesting that you landed up going to boarding school and just all that experience. And Miss South Africa, Miss Universe. So I have to ask you, the first question I really want to dive in and ask you is, all of this is quite challenging. You're a young girl, you're exposed to all of this thing, going to boarding school. There's a lot of stuff you've gone through, which would have challenged a lot of just mental health, managing, just coping and things. How did you cope with all these, being in the spotlight, going to boarding school, being on the huge stage from a small little town? It's quite a transition. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It really is quite a big transition, to be honest, from a very small town where, we have one grocery store, one clothing store that really just stocks school clothing and the pure basics, in our little town, to moving to one of the biggest cities in the world where, they say if you can't find it in New York, you probably don't need it. So that was quite a large transition, but definitely a fun one. Dr. Neve, I think I only realized a couple of years ago that I've probably been in therapy my whole life, because my stepmom is a neuropsychologist and she also has her own practice. So she does practice as well. And, she really is a second mom to me. I've known her since I was very, very young, and she's been in my life, just since I was 3 years old. So people would ask me, have you ever gone to therapy? I'm like, no, I've never been to therapy, but I realized that, no, actually I have been in therapy my whole life. So, from a clinical perspective, I've learned such valuable skills as, from a young girl. At the age of a young girl, I've learned such practical tools, skills that I could apply to my own life. I think one thing that my stepmom as a psychologist taught me from a very young age is how to set healthy boundaries, that no is an answer. And that those are things that I definitely were able to apply to my life from a young age. And she really gave me the ability and the confidence to not feel afraid to set healthy boundaries. I think, especially as women in the culture and the day and age that we live in, or just in the world that we live in, we are so scared to hurt other people's feelings. We have been taught from a young age, don't make a fuss, don't make a scene, you're probably wrong about that. You're over exaggerating, you're being too dramatic. But you know what? I think our sixth sense is, our intuition is something that is a beautiful gift that I think a lot of women have. I mean, not just women, but I think I don't know the science behind it, but I think it is a beautiful gift that we have, and you can probably speak more to that. But to listen to that, to not question that intuition, to seek that intuition, because I think as a believer, I believe that that intuition also comes from the Holy Spirit, and that is a protecting mechanism for you. So I think that's something that I've always tried to focus on, trying to make stronger. And other than that, I think from a mental health perspective, a couple of years ago, the word mental health wasn't even as popular of a phrase as it is now. It wasn't as comfortable of a phrase as it is now. But I think it's great that we are talking about it, that we are normalizing the conversation. I think it's needed. And I think something else that is super helpful when it comes to mental health is knowing that you can have a strong community around you. I think as as the human race, we were built for community. We were built for togetherness. We weren't built to be secluded. And I think that is a place that the enemy can very easily just have a field day in and make it his own, is when we seclude ourselves, when we put ourselves away alone from the people that love us, that care for us, that want to be there for us. And so that has always been something that I focused on, even as pretty much my mom's only child. I had a little sister, but she passed away a couple of years ago. But, really growing, she was much younger than me as well. So really growing up as an only child, that was something that I had to focus on, is to create a strong community. And thankfully, I already had that with my 4 parents. My parents were separated and divorced when I was really young, but I was very fortunate to gain 2 amazing, I don't even want to call them step parents, because they have truly, both my stepfather and mother have really raised me as their own child, which I'm very, very grateful for.
Well, that's incredible. You highlight some really important facts, the boundaries, which is really vital, that we understand our own self-boundaries and understand how to create boundaries, and knows an answer. I love that. The community aspect is so important. It's not about us, it's about us in the world. And isolation, we need deep, meaningful connection. I love how you approach that, because our current biomedical model is all about, there's emotions and illness, and if you have an emotion, there's something wrong with your brain. Meanwhile, we can't find a cause in the brain if we challenges just being a child of divorced parents, having great, you're very fortunate, you've got great stepmoms, but there's still that challenge. There's still the challenge of going to another country. We also move countries, of being in the public eye, of going to boarding school. These are all challenges that are totally part of being human, and our responses to those aren't mental illnesses. They are lifelong, they are normal responses. So the point I'm making is that I love how you've outlined, because one of the things in this podcast, Cleaning Up the Mental Mess, is to help people recognize that our life stories, we respond to our life experiences become our life stories, and how we respond is part of being a normal human. And we need the community, we need the boundaries, we need all of those things to help us. We don't need a label and to get stuck in a box. We need to recognize those things. I'm so pleased you highlighted the vital aspects of the normal human experience. Can we talk a little, if you're comfortable, about your sister? Because you talk about how that's how you met your husband. And I thought that was just a lovely, beautiful story, and very honoring of your sister as well. Are you comfortable sharing a little bit about that?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. My sister is such a big part of my life and my life story, my marriage story, and she really was our little matchmaker. My husband has, let me backtrack a little bit. I think one of the most beautiful things about our marriage is that our life's purposes, our life's missions and goals were aligned before we ever even met. And on the surface level, you might look at myself and my husband and you might think, wow, these two really have nothing in common. I mean, I'm a rugby girl. I don't know about you, Dr. Lee, but, I'm a rugby and cricket girl. He's a football guy. He loves American sports. I've never seen a football or a baseball or even basketball game in my life until I met him. So, when I first met my husband, I knew him as the Night to Shine guy. I had, at that point, never seen a football game, never seen a baseball game. And for those of you listeners that might not have the reference, my husband used to play professional football, professional baseball. And so by the point I met him, I had just no idea about his professional sport background. But I did know him as the Night to Shine guy. And the reason for that is Night to Shine is a worldwide prom for people with special needs, hosted in over 750 locations in over 40 countries at the moment. We serve, hundreds of thousands of honored kings and queens. And that all happens on the Friday before Valentine's Day every single year. And it is just one beautiful celebration of life, of people like my sister. And when I first moved to the US and lived in New York, and I was, Miss Universe, I did internet, US-based media, Good Morning America, etc. And they would ask me about my sister, and I've never been shy to share about her. But as a big sister, I've always been very protective of her and never wanted the media to make a story out of my sister's life, because that can very easily happen. And I was just always very cognizant of that. But the Tim Tebow Foundation and my husband, then Tim at the time, reached out and wanted to invite my sister to Night to Shine that was hosted for the first time in our home country, South Africa, as well. And unfortunately, my sister's health condition was just too poor that she could not physically attend. But to make a whole long story short, the invitation and, the invitation for my sister is really what brought us together. So, basically he invited my sister to prom and not me, but I'll take it.
You'll take it. Oh, that's amazing. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And, now fast forward a couple of years, we get to serve a large, honestly, one of the biggest minority groups in the world is the special needs community. And we get to serve alongside one another for people that means so much to both my husband and I. And that is such a great honor to be walking alongside my husband, serving alongside him, serving alongside the Tim Tebow Foundation, and in a sense also getting to see my little sister's legacy live on through that. We did lose her in 2019.
I'm so sorry.
She passed away when she was, thank you. She passed away when she was 13 years old, but every year we still get to celebrate her in so many ways.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing how your legacy can live on when you have the right shift in perspective and you turn around and help others? It's that community thing you spoke about. And, you can just see it sort of glowing out of your face and out of your life. And just in terms of what the two of you are doing, you've taken both of your incredible gifts and your public platform, where, as you said, you could have become a supermodel, but you've turned it around and you are helping others that are communities that are not recognized enough and doing what you can to do that. We've actually been in talks with the Tim Tebow Foundation in the States here in terms of helping with programs for in your Night to Shine and that kind of thing, which has been amazing. And just knowing what you do is incredible, and how you've turned your life into that gift for others, which is more enriching, I'm sure, than anything. I mean, talk about just how that touches you, and just tell us a little bit about that experience of being involved in such an incredible movement.
Mm-hmm. I think what you just mentioned, Dr. Leaf, is so vital. And I think when we focus on ourselves, that becomes the absolute object that we're focusing on, right? And we can completely get consumed with ourselves, our problems, the things that we need to do better, work better at, get better at. And that can, I'm speaking from personal experience, that can really consume you in a big way. And I see something that, just to take an example, like Night to Shine, the Tim Tebow Foundation has 16 different ministries or initiatives, and the special needs community is just one initiative that they serve in. But there's various aspects. My heart is specifically with the special needs community, and as well as the fight against human trafficking. That is a very big passion of mine. And, I've just seen that the moment you take the shift away from just fully focusing 100% on yourself and focusing on someone else's needs, I think the Lord can use that to put so much of your own life into perspective, and can take all that pressure of all the things that you need to do for yourself just off of yourself, and to focus on what you can actually do for someone else. Is, by giving, you're actually receiving so much in return. I remember the first time I went to go and volunteer at a Night to Shine prom in, 2019. I left with the mindset that I'm going to serve, I'm going to be giving, I'm going to be helping, I'm going to be shining shoes and putting tiaras on all the honored queens at the Night to Shine prom. And, I was going to be giving of myself. And I definitely did that. I did that the whole night to my best ability. But man, I left feeling so fulfilled, feeling so loved back, feeling so appreciated, feeling like I actually added to someone else's life. And indirectly, that really filled my own life with so much joy and happiness. And I think that's just something really beautiful that we all can do. Sometimes I think we limit ourselves by saying, I have to do something extravagant to make a difference in someone's life. But I think we put ourselves in a box. We limit ourselves because you never know how your life can be used to impact someone else's. And I think the only thing that we need to do is to be obedient where we are being called.
That is beautiful. And that brings me to the question of, your faith has been really important to you through this whole journey of your life and hugely into the public eye, and then once again now taking all those that incredible gift that you have to touch people's lives and turning that back into a different way of touching people's lives in terms of serving. You pretty much serve people and try and make a change. And your faith has played a very big role in this. Can you talk a little bit about how this has helped you, whatever you want to say about your faith and your belief and what this has done for you as a person? And you mentioned earlier on about this deep wisdom and insight. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of science behind that is actually our deepest part of us is what I call an unconscious mind from the scientific research. And that is this inner wisdom that we have that is connected to something beyond us. And it's there, it's inside of us. And as we reach out in community and create the self-boundaries and do the things that you've been saying and serve others, you actually tuning into that deep internal wisdom and making a difference in people's lives. And your life is very evident of that. Yours and Tim's, what you're doing is very evidence of tapping into that inner wisdom, that inner deep spiritual faith. So I'd love you to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you. I think something that I've grown up as a believer. I grew up in church. My parents are all Christian, and that's just the way I grew up. But I remember that that I was told that I had given my life to Christ when I was a young girl, but I think I was so young that I did not fully comprehend what that meant, what the magnitude of that decision was. And I think to a certain extent, being 5-6 years old, you don't even have a clear memory by the time you're 15 or 16 years old. And I just remember being in high school questioning, but did I actually surrender my life to Christ? Just kind of having that unsettledness, that feeling of just wondering, just not being fully certain. And one day our school was devastated by the loss of a dear friend when I was in 11th grade. And we all gathered on the sports field to just pray for his life and for his family. And youth pastor just asked if there was anyone that wanted to surrender their life to Christ. And right there on the sports field, right before my final maths exam, maybe that's one of the reasons, I don't know. I never liked math a lot. No, I'm just kidding. But, right there on that sports field, I just remember that, I don't want to doubt. I don't want to doubt this ever again. I don't want to doubt the decision that I made. And I put up my hand, and our youth pastor prayed with me. And I remember that I walked away from that sport field knowing that I never, ever have to question where I will spend eternity ever again. And that was the best decision that I have ever made in my entire life, and probably will be the best decision that I ever make in my entire life. But, surrendering your life to Christ does not mean that it's just going to be easy. It's not going to mean that it's always going to be smooth sailing. There's going to be hard times. The Bible tells us that we will have trials and tribulations, but take heart because the Lord has overcome the world. In this world we will have trials and tribulations, but he has overcome the world. And, there's been so many times in my life where I have faced trials and tribulations. I think two of the hardest things that I faced in my life have also formed a big part of my life's purpose. And one of those things were my sister, losing my sister, and just my sister's life overall. It was a really hard time in our family's life. But, I've told you the story of how beautifully that had ended, and, just how God has used my sister's life in such a beautiful way. But also the second hardest thing that I have faced in my life was probably a couple of years ago in 2017 on a Wednesday evening, broad daylight, peak hour traffic in Johannesburg, South Africa. I was held at gunpoint by 5 armed men and carjacked. I tried running away, but they grabbed me, pushed me back into the vehicle. And, to make a whole long story short, I was able to escape that situation unharmed, that I'm very grateful about. But that situation served as a catalyst to me learning about something that I genuinely did not know existed in the year 2017. And that is that an estimated 40.3 million people in the world are, as we're sitting right now, estimated to be trapped in some form of either sex or labor trafficking. That horrible, traumatic incident had shifted my life in such a big way where, one, I was able to learn way more about the gender-based violence situation in South Africa, the horrors that women in South Africa face. And secondly, just the horrors that women face all around the world. And by the way, it's not just women, it's men and children as well. I just left the Philippines a couple of months ago where, we learned that 8 out of 10 Filipino children are vulnerable to be sexually exploited online. And 42% of children that are sexually exploited online were done so by their own parents, and 80% by a relative, a neighbor, a friend, a family friend, a teacher, etc., which is awful. It is an evil that you can't even fully comprehend. And, my husband and I believe that that's one of the greatest evils that we are facing in our world today. It's one thing when you don't know. It's one thing when you don't have the knowledge. But when you do know and you decide to just absolutely do nothing, I don't know how you decide to do nothing when you have the knowledge and perhaps even a small opportunity to make an impact in even just one person's life, because I believe even just one person's life is worth fighting for. So, two of the greatest trials in my life have really both led to my life's greatest purpose. And my sister-in-law, Christy Allen, always says that the Lord will never waste pain that is given to him. And I resonate with that so much, because I have seen how he has done that in my own life, with losing my sister, with the traumatic incident that I, went through, how he truly used the pain that caused in my life for purpose.
And that's impacted your well-being, your mental well-being, how you function and how you give back to community, which has been your healing. I can relate to both of those incidents, having grown up in South Africa as well. And, I read about your incidents, and that, to get away from 5 people, I do not know how you did that, because that, and also just you and I know the statistics in South Africa for being carjacked and 5 men. So, I'd love to know a little bit more about how you actually got away. But we've also, my husband and I, with our 4 young children, when we were on the beach in South Africa at our holiday home, one of multiple incidents. If you live in South Africa and you're a South African, you and I could probably sit all day sharing stories. But we also underwent a situation where we were all nearly stabbed to death. And, and it was just an absolute miracle that they were stabbing at my husband, these 2 men, out of the blue, and they didn't even touch him. There was like this protection around him, and I had 4 small children, and how we got away. And there's so many incidents like that, how you can transform it. As you say, when you've been touched like that, your life transforms. And the Philippines, I've been there too, and seeing those the slum areas, it's like and those statistics, it was absolutely eye-opening, horrific. So when I'm nodding my head with your 2 incidents, I can relate so much to them and how that changes you. And I'm so pleased that you've taken that and are telling the world about that, because we do need to stand together. It's us together as a community that we can make the difference.
Yeah. Dr. Leigh, I love our home country so, so, so much. And every chance I get to come back, like I said before, I grab at that opportunity. But I think it would be unwise of us to be ignorant to the facts that so many women face in our country.
Terrible.
And
it's terrible.
If there's even just, even if we could just bring awareness to the world for people to just truly understand what women in South Africa face. We were celebrating Women's Month a couple of days ago on the 9th of August in South Africa. And, that day is supposed to be a celebration. But I think many South African women will agree with me that I don't know if we can fully celebrate yet, because there is so much that needs to be done in order to protect our women, to protect our children in this country. It is such a beautiful country. It is it's a country with so much incredible potential. It's so full of the most beautiful resources. I'm literally sitting in my favorite city in the world, but we cannot be ignorant to pretending that we are safe as women in South Africa.
Demi, just talk a little bit, if you don't mind, just about, let people be aware. I'd really love you to just talk a little bit about, because it's Cape Town is considered, I think it's the 11th in the country, in the world. It's the 11th most dangerous city in the world. So you're not looking at something that is, this is not just these serious problems there. Would you mind just giving us a few statistics? I know you mentioned a few, but talk a little bit more about, just so people are aware.
I'm not fully clued up on the exact statistics. So
absolutely, just a broad overview.
Out of turn, yeah. But I think we have just rape against women and children is something that we face on a daily basis. A couple of weeks ago, we had a film crew that were shooting. I think that's actually a story that made international news, but there's so many stories that, don't make news, that we never really even hear about. Never mind international news, doesn't even make national news, where, I believe it was a film crew where multiple women were raped by multiple men, just being on set, doing their job, minding their own business. It's just horrors that take place. I'm not fully sure why these things happen. I really don't understand it. I would love to understand it better. I can speak. Some of the work that our foundation does here in South Africa, our partners are Impact Africa, and they do incredible work. First and foremost, they try to equip mothers with the necessary skills, knowledge, tools, resources to be able to keep their own babies. We know that culturally so many women end up in relationships where they fall pregnant, but it's they might not be in a married relationship, and the moment they fall pregnant, they get left behind and the child gets left behind, and therefore we are dealing with a large number of abandoned babies. And by abandoned babies, I mean babies that are found in trash cans, sewage drains, public bathrooms, just the most horrible of, dumpsters, most horrible places. And so together with our partners, the Tintero Foundation, and our partners, Impact Africa, we have built a safe home for babies that have been abandoned in the Johannesburg area. I think the statistic is that 3 to 4 babies get abandoned a day in Johannesburg, just the Johannesburg region of South Africa. Correct. And so, that is such a sad thing to imagine, that a mom who I'm sure loves that child feels that she is so desperate and in such a vulnerable position that she feels that is her only choice. That is something that is so sad. And so first and foremost, we try to help create strong families. We try to help mothers be able to support their babies. But in case they feel that there is absolutely no other outcome, we have provided a safe place for that baby to be able to be taken in, to receive a loving, caring home where they receive, where they are well fed, well taken care of, and where they have the opportunity to first and foremost possibly be reintegrated with a family member, and if not, to be adopted into a forever family. So there's so many things that I think women deal with on their own in our country, and that's just one of the things.
Thank you for sharing that, and that's such a real problem. I remember when I was working I used to go into the the township areas, which were in South Africa. For those of you that don't know, in the apartheid era, the black community was pushed out into the outskirts and put into these awful like townships. And I used to go for 25 years. My husband would go and help with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and then building of houses and getting them out of the street and into homes. And that was what he did. And then I'd go in and work with the communities and help them learn how to learn and manage their mental health. And I remember one day a young girl coming, I was teaching a group of people, there would be thousands that would come, it would be unbelievable. And this young girl came, and there was a commotion, and the teachers just basically put a blanket around her, and they came up and whispered in my ear that they thought she was bleeding, they thought it was her menstrual cycle, but she had just been raped. And she knew I was in town because I did so much work there, and she wasn't going to miss the session. And she crept to that meeting in that state and they wrapped a blanket around, and she sat at my feet for 4 hours. Demi, that incident changed my life completely, and it was in the early days of my work and research. And I share that story to share, just to undergird what you're saying. And this is now almost 28 years ago. And here we are sitting 28 years later, and this is still a problem. And, this is a major problem. So I just wanted to say thank you to you and to Tim for taking your platform and still coming, even though you're in the States, you're still trying to help what's happening in South Africa and recognize that this is a major problem. So I just want to honor you both for that and say thank you, and may your foundation grow and touch, millions of lives. And I'm so thrilled to be able to share what you're doing. And I'd love to talk again. And I can't believe our conversation's already come to an end, and I feel like we just began, but we will definitely have to talk again. So thank you so much. Is there anything that you'd like to just say, in closing to share with my audience? Is there anything you'd like to pearl of wisdom that you'd like to share?
Gosh, I don't know how
You have
I
so
would share
many. You
even
have so
more
many.
wisdom. No, I don't know how I would share more wisdom than you would be able to share. And I just think something that I just personally love is, when I read the Bible, I look at stories of Ruth and Naomi, and I read them, and I read them as a Bible story. But something that I've just realized is that no, those are Bible realities. It's things that women just like us went through, yes, ages ago, in a different era, different lifetime. Their circumstances were very different to the modern world right now. But the stories that their lives were about, I think the story of Ruth and Naomi talks so much about just obedience, being obedient to where you are called to in your life. And I think there's so much blessing in obedience and through obedience. And so I think, just like I said in the beginning, just believe and follow the intuition that you have inside of you. As a believer, I believe that that's the Holy Spirit guiding me every single day, and that I believe and try to hold on to that. And secondly, just be obedient to what you're called to in your life. I believe that there will be great blessing in obedience.
Thank you so much. It's amazing. Demi, how can people find out more about you, about the Tim Tebow Foundation? And also you do your basically Unbreakable, the philanthropy project that you have running. Can you talk just, in closing, can you just tell us a little bit about that and how people can find out more and help you?
Yeah, that's so sweet. Well, you can find us anywhere on social media. I'm Demi-Leigh Tebow. Type in Demi-Leigh Tebow, you will find something. And then if you want to learn more about the Tim Tebow Foundation, you can visit timtebowfoundation.org. They also have social media pages on all social media platforms that you can look up to. And Unbreakable was I actually did not touch on that earlier, but Unbreakable was a workshop that was born out as a residue of the carjack that I went through. And the reason I wanted to start Unbreakable was to empower women in South Africa, just because of all the things that we had talked about just now that women in South Africa face, to be able to empower them with physical and practical tools of how to, one, try to prevent the unwanted situation from happening when that is in your ability. It's not always in your ability. But secondly, how to handle a situation like that. And secondly, how to get away from a situation like that. It was so important to me to be able to start the Unbreakable workshop, because prior to my carjack experience, I actually went through multiple self-defense workshops. My mom and my dad and my family had always sent me on women empowerment workshops and safety driving courses. I mean, I could change a tire before I could even ever drive a vehicle. And, that was just because I had really loving, caring parents that wanted to empower me with really practical tools. And two of the things that I remembered in that traumatic incident was, one, don't ever go to the second destination. Whatever is going to happen in your front yard or on a big avenue is probably not going to get better somewhere downtown with 10 other of their friends. So don't ever go to the second destination. And the second thing that I learned was the throat. It's accessible, extremely lethal, so please don't ever joke around or play around with that. You can kill someone by punching them in the throat. It's not going to hurt our hand. It's accessible to any woman. And the moment that I was pushed back into the vehicle, I grabbed the steering wheel and I punched the guy on my side of the vehicle as hard as I could in his throat. And that bought me a very, very small window, split-second opportunity to be able to run away. And that was exactly what I did. And those skills, those practical tools were so applicable in my situation. And I wanted to be able to bring that to women that have not necessarily had the opportunity to attend a safety driving course or a self-defense workshop. And I actually incorporated different field experts. I'm obviously not the field expert, but I incorporated different field experts, like, people that's in the same industry as yourself, to speak about setting physical and emotional and mental boundaries for ourselves so that we can become comfortable with doing so. Get out of that elevator if you're not comfortable being in that elevator. Get out on the wrong floor. Go back to the lobby. Ask the manager of the grocery store to walk you to your vehicle. Just different things like that I think is super practical that we can apply in our daily life. And so that's where Unbreakable was born. We're actually in the process of relaunching it very, very soon. And now that we can have in-person events again, so I will keep you posted and let you know. And maybe one day you can join me.
That sounds amazing. I'd love to do that. And I can't wait to speak again. And thank you for sharing that. Wow. That is just in the few minutes you gave people some tips. And so people you'll be watching for that, and be fantastic to connect with you and help you in any way. So thank you so much for joining me today. You've been amazing.
Thank you, Dr. Leigh. Have a wonderful day.
You too.